I grew up in New Zealand, and it was a great childhood, but I left pretty young for a number of reasons, not least of which being that I had this really cool scholarship opportunity. So I ended up traveling overseas to finish my secondary education, and I went to an internationally focused boarding school near Tel Aviv. There, I was just exposed to so many different cultures, perspectives, backgrounds. I got to learn about issues that affected communities outside of my own, and I got to understand firsthand the perspectives of people who lived through those challenges, how to address them, and how to cope with them, as well as what solutions would be appropriate. So I got involved in a lot of different social causes. I got involved in veganism, animal rights. I got involved in sustainability. I also got really involved in different forms of equity work. So over the next few years, I traveled a lot and kind of tried to build those schools, but also to action on some of them. And I was fortunate enough to spend time living and working in a number of different professions in a number of different countries. And I went to places like Thailand for several months. I went to Macedonia. I traveled all over Europe and just had this incredible exposure. And after a while, I moved to the States and decided to go to college here. So I studied chemistry and I studied communication. I didn't study business. I didn't study finance. And honestly, up to the point of getting into college, I'd never heard about VC ever. I just never heard these terms before. So somewhat fortuitously, as a not by my own design, I got involved in venture capital through a university fund in the Kansas City area. And I just became fascinated by the world of investing and the potential to create impact, as well as the world of entrepreneurship and just the desire to create. So that's kind of how I got in the door. And then after about 3 years of that, I transitioned over to working in straight out capital. And I just knew that it was a great fit for me. The thesis aligned with my own values. The team are experts in their field and focus on collaborating with entrepreneurs. The unique model that is utilized that involves social responsibility is something very interesting to me. And then also, I mean, the opportunity in the alternative protein space is just huge. Yeah. There's so much room for innovation. So all that to say, I think my background shapes how I think about VC, and it shapes how I assess companies, think about markets, and understand things like social impact, which is really important in an impact-driven. So Straight Out Capital is an impact-driven venture fund, and the kind of underlying impact or mission that really drives us is reinventing or improving our food system to be more sustainable, more healthy, more accessible, and more humane. So to that end, we invest in plant-based CPG companies, we invest in cellular agriculture and cellular aquaculture, and then we also invest in some other companies, typically biotech or food tech companies that are working towards that same mission. So when we diligence companies, of course, we look for some of these standard elements that most VC firms will look at, things like the market size, the defensibility, the scalability, and the team. But we also look at what kind of impact this product or this company will be creating. So one metric would be, how is this changing consumer behavior? Another would be, is this making plant-based food more accessible? A third would be looking at the different markets that this is going to be touching and whether or not this is going to be creating value or just creating substitutes. So to that end, a large part of our diligence is focused on the impact, and in a very social way, what that impact is. In 2018 alone, it was over 340 million tons. That's just an unsustainable amount of animal-based protein that we're reliant on. And in that, you know, we live clearly in a time of plenty. Most of us have access to things that our grandparents, our great-grandparents couldn't even dream of. At the same time, we're at risk of being overfed and undernourished. We're not getting what we need to sustain our bodies, which are kind of our base units of function. in this society.
Yeah.
So in that regard, I think working on the food system is imminent, and there's a lot of evidence against it. You know, in the US alone, 99% of the meat consumed comes from factory farms, and that includes fish. And factory farms, we know they're bad for the environment. There are human health concerns pertaining to things like the overuse of antibiotics and unsterile conditions. There's animal welfare concerns in a big way. And we know for a fact that all of these negative effects disproportionately affect marginalized communities relative to others. So, on that, there are a lot of arguments that are pointing towards working on the food system as being something that's just paramount to our day-to-day life. And I didn't even get into the damage we're doing to our planet.